As we are starting to wind down the support from BT17, it is finally time, as Gallantmon is the next strategy we are going to look at from its support in BT17, as we have the set releasing in August, on August 9th here in America or NA area, as well as the rest of the world. And we are almost finished with BT17, as I will start BT18 very, very soon for What's the Scoop, as it'll probably be here in no time flat. But before I get into it, as always, remember we are on the search to 250 subs. At the time of recording, we are currently at about 236, 237, and I'd love for you to be a part of that race up to 250. So obviously, as you remember, and for all you who are maybe first-time watchers as well, for What's the Scoop, you get a first look, but I do as well. So it does allow me to look at these amazing cards and inform you about what they do. Now, obviously, we also have a lot of cards actually for Gallantmon. Gallantmon is the most supported strategy in BT17. Interestingly enough, it is not necessarily one of the main focuses, although this is technically a protagonist set. It has the most support, having technically 8 cards additionally added to the strategy, specifically either designed to support it or add more names into boosting its power potential, as well as a lot. It has a tamer, it has a new ace level 7, and it also has an option card to go with it. So we are going to jump straight to it so we can get through them to boot. Starting off, we have a brand new Gallantmon here, which is the level 2 egg of this set in red, and it has a very interesting effect as well as a very in-theme effect for the Gallantmon strategy, which is when attacking by paying 1 cost, you can delete one of your opponent's Digimon with 3000 DP or less. So very standard, as we have a brand new Gallantmon to go with the Gallantmon, as this is a hard to play 3, 1000 DP, Digivolve on the top of any red level 2 for a cost of 0, and is obviously a level 3 Digimon, which has an interesting effect that your turn, once per turn, when one of your Gallantmon or Tamers with Takato Matsuki in their name is played, you delete one of your opponent's Digimon with 3000 DP or less. If this effect didn't delete, you gain 1 memory. As it's inheritable, all turns, while you have 0 or less memory, add 2000 to this Digimon's DP-based deletion effects maximums. Moving into the brand new Gallantmon we have for the BT17 line, it is a hard-to-play 5-cost Digimon with 5000 DP, Digivolving on top of any red level 3 for a cost of 2, and reads as follows. When Digivolving, you delete one of your opponent's Digimon with 4000 DP or less. If this effect didn't delete, this Digimon gets 3000 DP for the turn. And then additionally for the inheritable, all turns, while you have 0 or less memory, add 2000 to this Digimon's DP minus base deletion effects maximums. Moving into the brand new level 5, we have a brand new War Gallantmon, as this one is a play cost 7 for 7000 DP and can Digivolve on top of any red level 4 for a cost of 3. And reads as follows. When Digivolving, you can delete one of your opponent's Digimon with 6000 DP or less. If this effect didn't delete, this Digimon gains Security Attack +1 for the turn. All turns, once per turn, when an effect deletes an opponent's Digimon, you may unsuspend this Digimon with Gallantmon in its name. As we will move into the brand new level 6 Gallantmon here, this one is actually going to be a rare, which is really cool. It is a hard-to-play cost 11 with 11,000 DP, Digivolving on top of any red level 5 for a cost of 3, and reads as follows, that when Digivolving or when attacking, you delete one of your opponent's Digimon with 8,000 DP or less. If this effect didn't delete, this Digimon gets 3,000 DP and gains a blocker until the end of your opponent's turn. Your turn, while you have 0 or less memory, this Digimon isn't affected by your opponent's effects. Very interesting as we go into the brand new level 7, as we have a brand new Gallantmon Crimson mode, and it's even an Ace Digimon. So, a lot of a mouthful if you want to say all that. But let's jump straight to it because it's very interesting, as it's a hard-to-play cost 8. And it has, obviously, Digivolve on top of any red level 6 for a cost of 5 with 15,000 DP, and reads as follows. It may Digivolve on top of a level 6 with Gallantmon in its name for a cost of 4, as it has the Hand Blast counter Ace condition, which allows it to Digivolve during your opponent's turn when they attack. On play and or when Digivolving, you get to delete up to 15,000 DP total worth of your opponent's Digimon. Then when attacking, once per turn, for every 10 total cards in both players' trashes, trash the top card of your opponent's security stack. However, it also carries the overflow condition of -5, so when this leaves the battle area, you're paying 5 memory. As we jump into the brand new Takato Matsuki here, this one is actually a 3 cost to play Tamer, and will focus on very similar effects to its Tamer's counterparts, as the Rika from this set is somewhat similar. At the start of your main phase, if you have a Digimon with Gallantmon, Growlmon, or Gallantmon in its name, you get to gain 1 memory. However, at the end of your turn, by placing this Tamer and 1 Growlmon and 1 War Growlmon from your trash as one of your Gallantmon's bottom Digi-Evolution cards, that Digimon may Digivolve into Gallantmon in the hand, ignoring its Digi-Evolution requirements and without paying the cost. And additionally, for the security effect, you simply just play out this Tamer. So very, very good. Now, finally, we move into the final card for the support, which is obviously an in-theme option that has been going along with some of the others you've seen from BT17. As this is Crimson Savior, which reads as follows. For its main effect, you may play 1 Gallantmon or Takato Matsuki from your hand or trash without paying the cost, then you place this card in the battle area. All turns when an opponent's level 5 or higher Digimon is played, for the delay, one of your Digimon may Digivolve into a Digimon card with Gallantmon in its name in the hand without paying the cost. And additionally, for security, you activate this card's main effect. So very, very simple. And that's it actually for all the cards, everyone. So we have obviously a lot of questions here, but going through all 8 cards and seeing everything that we have, obviously the first question that always goes into the air is, what can you do with these? Well, the thing with the Growlmon and Gallantmon, one of its biggest problems as an entire deck strategy is that for the most part until BT9, this deck has always had support that kind of conflicts with what it wants to do. A lot of times you'll see some DP buffing effects, but many times you'll see these DP minus boosting or deletion effects placed on the Gallantmon or basically the Growlmon line, where they decide that they want to start deleting Digimon, but they also boost up the ability to delete them, so maybe board control, but simultaneously they're also an aggression and security manipulation deck where they want to target down the security. It's a really confusing thing sometimes when you look at this deck, because depending on where you want to go with it and how you want to play it, really does change the direction it goes. I do think with this support, though, a new line's been added to kind of fix as many of the issues as possible, which is more so, I think, the idea that they want to focus on is the DP deletion effects and making sure that the deck now has far more options to clear boards better than it did before. As when we look at the last line of support that we have from EX4, which is the primary focus, because obviously there is the BT13 Gallantmon, but it's not necessarily tied into Gallantmon as a deck more than it is meant to be for Royal Knights, as we have the Chaos Gallantmon and the Chaos, or actually the Medieval Gallantmon that was released in EX4, as both of these lines added different kind of pacings to the deck, where Medieval Gallantmon adds an element of suspending as well as kind of security base effects to allow you to maybe stall your opponent down. We now also have Chaos Gallantmon, which was designed to boost up the trash and delete your opponent's Digimon while simultaneously fueling maybe Magidramon plays. As you kind of get with what I'm saying, the deck has been pulled so many different directions and makes it hard to pinpoint down what it's supposed to do. But I do think that with this line of support, we finally have what the deck is trying to accomplish, as it's supposed to be a pseudo-balance aggressive state deck, which, although that sounds kind of confusing, you have to look at what the effects are doing, as you see a lot of the Growlmon's effects that have already done deletions or popping effects, as well as adding these buffs to the -2000s in the case of the Gallantmon from BT17, as well as its Growlmon counterpart. The hardest part, I think, for the decks, or specifically for Gallantmon going forward, is that these cards have to compete with the cards that already do a lot of work. A good example is obviously Growlmon from BT12. That one is a hard one to argue in terms of keeping its spacing, because that Growlmon plays out Takato for free. This one does not, but it does allow your DP minus effects in the long run to do 4,000 more to the deletion. So effectively allowing Gallantmon to take out level or Digimon with 12,000 DP or less, and even allowing War Growlmon to take out 10,000 DP Digimon and less. So you do see that the support's mainly meant to kind of deal with opponents' boards while simultaneously climbing up into their bosses. So, there's a lot going on here. I do think that of this line of support, the best cards here are debatably maybe the Guilmon, the new Gallantmon, and probably Crimson Mode, and then the Tamer, and finally the Crimson Savior. Now, the reason I say it in kind of those orders is that, unfortunately, I don't really see a world where the the Growlmon and the War Growlmons outplace the past War Growlmons they have. I do think one of the problems that a lot of the Guilmon line has is that the War Growlmons, for the most part, have been somewhat underwhelming. I do think the best one is still the one from the starter deck that's really old at this point now, which is kind of weird to say, but is old. And the Gallantmon in this set is actually really stellar, I think, because it has a decent reduction effect or deletion effect that does get buffed up by the previous or new lines, and it does gain blocker and can become technically unprotected or protected and unaffected by your opponent's cards. So that by itself already makes this card a possible play when you want to change how the deck works. Another card that I do believe is interesting is the Guilmon, because now Guilmon does allow you to kind of refund your memory while you play your Takados, and I do think that that is an amazing tool to have, whether it's in the early game or mid game. So say you hard play out a Guilmon, and then you have this in the raising, you digivolve the Guilmon or the level 3 you have into a Growlmon. That Growlmon will then play the Takado. This Guilmon will trigger and you will be able to gain a memory or delete. So that already is actually a pretty solid combo, I think. As I do think that this deck really has to be tweaked to whatever you want it to do. I think Gigimon from EX2 is still probably the best one to get the cards from effects when you attack, so it's kind of hard to not want to play that. However, I do love this Gigimon's effect because, in theory, it does work together with the Guilmon and Growlmon from this deck. And so what I mean is, if you use its effects with both Growlmon and Guilmon, if on top of, say, a level 5 that can delete, you're looking at 5, 7. Okay, so you're adding in a total of deleting up to 7,000 if you want to use the effect, because you would delete a Digimon with 3,000 DP or less, but because of the inheritables, you would add 2,000 to each. So with Gigimon, a level 5 can delete any 7k and lower by just paying a memory. So I think that's a really cool connection. Now, talking about specifically Crimson Mode and the Tamer as well, I do really enjoy the continuation of adding these level 7s to these decks that already had them. I think Crimson Mode really did need a revamp because the one that we have from EX2 is not bad. It was just really hard to get it into play because what you'd do is you'd have to use the effects to kind of go into it as like almost a bomb play to finish your opponent off. And I think by making this an ace card and allowing it to kind of gel back into the new format with the speed that it's at, I do think this deck is able to take advantage of a lot of decks that it couldn't compete against. So if you're able to get a Gallantmon into rotation, say against something like Fenrir Lugumon, or like decks that like to just draw and mill cards, you have a better chance at possibly winning the game if their trash is high, and this card pops out of nowhere and just starts, melting security away like normal. So, Crimson Mode Ace is really strong for that reason. Also, one thing that we have to keep in mind, the new Takado Tamer allowing you to do the warping in the end of turn is, I know, specifically kind of designed to work with the Crimson Savior option, but it's a little hard to debate whether you really want to use that effect more often. And the biggest reason why is you need to get the War Growlmon, you need to get the Growlmon in trash, and then you lose the Tamer in order to warp into Gallantmon, although you don't pay the cost, which I think is fantastic. I do think it needs a little bit more setup, so it makes your plays a bit harder to pull off. Because I think one big aspect that Gallantmon really has been struggling with as a deck is just being able to pressure the opponent quickly enough to where it doesn't feel like you're always behind. I think one card that really could have been a benefactor to do that would probably be the Growlmon from the set. I really think instead of it gaining DP, it would have been really good if what it did was instead of deleting just like Gallantmon, you just gain a memory back. Because I do think that if this deck is just a little bit more memory efficient, it would definitely help out even with like options and training cards. I don't really think it accelerates this deck enough. Like it does give it the tools it needs to be as consistent, but any other red deck can play it is what I'm getting at. So in order to make the line a bit better, I think one of these Digimon should have refunded memory back. I do know that the War Growlmon X can do that with its deletion effect, which is fantastic. So, I do think you still run the X line of the Gallantmon line because I just think it's just that strong. You probably don't run Growlmon. You just run maybe the War Growlmon X's and the Gallantmon X's like before, and Gallantmon X obviously because its effect is just really good. But because they've changed the way that you can Digivolve with the Crimson mode, having to pay 4 costs to go on top of like Gallantmon X isn't that bad. So it's worth it in the end. But pretty much that's all I've got for you guys today. There's not really much I would say about blending the strategy over with other decks. It is kind of generic, so it is kind of up to you. But I do think that this deck will benefit more so from experimentation and maybe a little bit more future support. I do think it's kind of annoying at this point that they haven't really pinned down what they want this deck to do. And if anyone's going to argue and say, oh, this deck has a linear play like a structure, it does not. From all of its support, it's still like kind of disjointed, and I don't really think that's fair for the deck. I think this deck really should already be streamlined because it is technically one of the older strategies in the entire game, debuting all the way from technically BT2 in Japan, but for us in our 1.0 set. This deck is just really needs some play because Gallantmon should have been a top deck at least at this point by now. At least once. It's in more of always like the never the best, never the worst type of deck, where it's like it's there. It may not do anything. Some formats it might be able to be somewhat okay in a format, but it's never been a top dog. Except for when it came out with its BT9 support, which is obviously the X antibody support, which basically turned every deck into a cannon, essentially, versus like people having pea shooters is my way of expressing it because, X antibody decks were just inherently better because they had search power, they had more abilities, they had extra draws. But I'm just kind of rambling at that point. The point is, this deck deserves to be better, and you let me know what you think of the BT17 support. Do you love it? Do you hate it? Do you think that Bandai just hates this deck for some reason? Because even like Sakuyamon and Terriermon at this point have been playable multiple times, where Gallantmon still seems to be on the fritz of being able to function with a proper, game plan in mind. But as always, guys, this has been Brad from the Ad Army signing off. And for all of you out there, to sign on.